Welcome! I am the Moonshine King. Today I am reviewing part 3 of the iconic comic book story Batman Year 1. Make sure to watch my part 1 and part 2 reviews first, so you are up to date. I will have the link in the card above, and of course there will be spoilers ahead. So proceed at your own risk. Part 2 ended with this police kill squad bombing the building that Batman had escaped into after being chased and shot by the police. He was shot in his leg, you might recall. But they didn't leave it at that, clearly. They sent in this squad to search for Batman, and it is quite clear that they're out for blood. Chapter 3 is called Black Dawn, which I assume is a reference to all these bats almost blocking out the sun, as you can see on this cover page. And it's not just totally arbitrary and random, like, shall we say, Twilight, Breaking Dawn, or any of the other titles in that series. The caption for this chapter is, "They've got him cornered. They've got him outnumbered. They've got him trapped. They're in trouble." Well, it certainly doesn't look that way upon the first page, as we see Batman is a very serious spot of hot bother. I must tell you, he is in a lot of trouble. I'm not sure exactly who Batman has actually saved in this story so far, but it's certainly not this guy. Batman looking very hopeless to save this old man. I might mention that this building was supposedly meant for demolition, but the police never actually checked to make sure anybody was in the building. They just came along and had it blown up without a care in the world. Batman's utility bed catches fire, and he has to pull it off. I would say this is a great shame. The problem is, we've never actually seen him use his belt at all. I'm pretty sure never at all in the story, so I can't say I exactly feel any kind of tension here. Merely the loss of opportunity to show off what his belt could do. But he decides to hide under a locked door in the flooring, which says, "Danger, electricity, 80,000 watts. Praying that that part is just a lie. Hopefully. I'm not sure exactly why he would just assume that was a lie. Why would they have the need to lie about that anyway? Unless the building was owned by a mastermind who was running evil experiments down there or something and didn't want any innocent visitors. But I'm assuming that wasn't the case at all. Anyway. But you never know in Gotham. He picks up the lock with his pick he kept up his sleeve. Very high tech for you. Does that actually work in real life, or is that just a thing from the movies and comics, apparently? But judging by Bruce Wayne's performance in the previous parts, karate chopping concrete bricks, kicking down trees, breaking handcuffs with his bare hands, I'm very surprised he couldn't merely break the chains apart with his bare fingers. Anyway, it sure was easy to break into this dangerous 80,000 watts compartment, or so called. June the 7th it is now, which is the next day. So it must be very early hours. We see Selina Kyle being woken up by her Siamese cat, and we notice her bed is just full of cats. I don't know how she affords to feed them all. I know she is a hawker, but you wouldn't have thought she'd be making that kind of money, considering she's still staying in this hovel of a home. Anyway, her friend notices the explosions outside. Selina thinks Blondin, who is the squad leader, may have cornered what she calls a jaywalker, and I have no clue what a jaywalker is, so that went over my head entirely. Meanwhile, they still seem to be blowing up the place. Gordon is convinced that Batman is going to end up being killed by Brandon and his SWAT team. He was told it was commissioner's orders. I find this odd, as we're told previously that the commissioner is already on thin ice. There is already suspicion around him, and we were told that Batman was actually quite popular, I think, with the press, certainly the everyday citizens of Gotham, for helping to reduce crime. And yet the commissioner has resorted to this totally drastic action to try and kill the Batman. I don't see how this is helping his PR at all. It didn't show it happening, but clearly Gordon has had an injury to his head since the last time we saw him, since he has it bandaged. Don't they even wait for their own officers to get out of the way before bombing the place? Very extraordinary for me. I wonder where Detective Flass is at this point. You would have thought he'd have wanted to be here, settle an old score. Or Gordon's partner, Detective Essen. She seems to have disappeared from the picture. But Gordon reflects on Batman's situation, realizing he's only been trapped because he saved an old woman being run over by the truck, if you recall. And there's still a fragmented relationship between Gordon and the police. He doesn't consider himself entirely on their side, certainly not by the way they do things. Selina and her friend listening on the TV that Batman has been surrounded after attacking 2 police officers, one of which being hero cop Lieutenant James Gordon. This is a lie, of course. He only attacked 1 police officer, and it was Detective Essen, not Gordon. Selina and her friend decide to make a day trip out of it, apparently. We're told that it's 18 heavily armed SWAT team guys going in after Batman. And they seem to find the metal trapdoor pretty quickly, despite the giant size of that building. But I suppose we don't know exactly how much time has passed. So they're told to shoot a steady burst, even if he looks dead. Some classic police brutality right there. So white privilege doesn't seem to count for much in Gotham. Though I suppose Batman's costume does have a fair bit of black on it. Very problematic for you. But it turns out that Batman was hiding in this chimney. Why there was a chimney down there, I couldn't tell you. And if it's not a chimney, then it's a volcano. Batman pinches 2 of these guys by the neck, and they collapse, apparently, without making a sound or alerting anybody. I'm not sure if the neck pinch is a particular speciality of Bat. Maybe he should have been Crabman, not the Batman. He doesn't do a whole lot of flying, does he? Anyway, we get a peek of what was down the trap door. A toilet and a sink, and some posters about Jesus and God. And a statue on a table which looks like either Mary or Jesus, and a book. Now, unless that book is supposed to be the first recording of the Bible, or it's some ancient book of secrets or magic, then I really don't understand the justification for this basement to have been chained off with a warning that it contained 80,000 watts of electricity, which, by the way, Brandon and his crew weren't at all bothered about either. People don't listen to warnings in Gotham. But no wonder there's so many crazy, transformed, mutant superheroes and supervillains in this world. People just don't pay any attention to hazard signs. If there's a warning, listen to the warning, or you might end up like Clayface, or Poison Ivy, or the Incredible Hulk, or something. But Batman covers the trapdoor with this massive wooden beam. This beam would have weighed a ton. Another example of Batman's superhuman capabilities in what I assume is only a matter of moments. He manages to move this giant thing, presumably without making much noise either, and just plonk it on top of them without anyone hearing anything in time. I mean, how long does it take for all these men to search that little basement anyway? Batman drops a pellet down this chimney. These officers must be used to seeing these little nuggets, because one of them is quite sure they need to reach for their gas masks quick. But we unfortunately don't see what happens to them. It sort of just skips ahead, which I think is a shame. I'd have liked to see some people getting knocked out by Batman's odor. Commissioner Loeb is flying overhead, disapproving of their progress at killing him. Batman acknowledges that the only other survivor of the attack is this cat. I've no idea how he knows this exactly, unless he's done a quick sprint around the entire premises in the time since we last saw him, which I think is quite doubtful. But he blames himself for allowing things to get to this stage, making a mess of things. He refers to the squad as the enemy, which technically they are, but I hadn't thought Batman would think in such a black and white manner. To me that sounds more like a villain sort of mentality. Either you're with me, or you're my enemy. Sound familiar? He says, because he lost his belt, he lost his rope, his thermite, his tear gas, and his batarangs. Well, he certainly didn't put his rope to much use when he was trapped in that alleyway earlier, but perhaps there wasn't time. All the same, a rope doesn't sound very high-tech, does it? I'm not sure what a thermite does. Maybe it's like an explosive, possibly. Maybe something he used to break the wall of the mayor's mansion. Tear gas! I don't think I've ever known Batman to use tear gas, unless that's also the thing he used at the mansion. It was very smoky for sure, but all he has left is a blowgun. So I will reiterate again. What weapons does he have that are so advanced that Gotham's DA wouldn't be able to afford? These seem quite like basic things to me. However, Batman does have one thing which I imagine would have been very expensive, but I'm pretty sure this is his first time using it ever. He has an unofficial invention of Wayne Electronics, and he even says he couldn't have built it unless he had a fortune. It is a device which uses ultrasonic sound at a certain frequency which will attract bats. His mansion is located over a huge cave full of bats. He calls it the Bat Cave, of course. So his plan is to attract all these bats from Wayne Manor all those miles away and underground. Somehow they'd be able to hear it from that distance. Amazing technology indeed. Amazing creatures for you, and hope they'd get there in just a few minutes. Is it feasible? Is it realistic for you? I'm not going to bother researching it, but I suspect if this was possible, we would be seeing some real-life demonstrations by now, or in the near future. Now, this bit was a little bit jarring because in this panel, Batman is just waiting in the shadows, hiding, saying they can waste all the time they want. And then we see the squad above this trapdoor again, and one of them going down the chimney, and he gets hit by a Batman sleeping dart. And then next panel, we see Batman rolling away from all this gunfire. So I found this quite confusing to follow. How did Batman manage to shoot this guy going down this chimney with his dart when Batman's on the lower level, isn't he? Or is he hiding in the same room as the chimney and the trapdoor? And what made Batman suddenly reveal himself? Did they just find him? What happened here? Anyway, Batman is in a very tricky situation indeed. He knows one bullet will make all the difference, and they've got thousands. That is very true for you, Batman. And it must tell you it is a miracle you weren't shot dead at such a close range of all these men with such firepower, especially when you consider that just earlier you got shot by just an ordinary policeman from quite some distance away, and who only had a simple pistol. So, not very believable to you, not consistent indeed. He does get shot once though, I guess, but only because he stopped to throw a cat out of the window behind him. As you can see, Brandon's men are not very careful. They shoot out the window, and this police officer outside gets shot in the shoulder, which makes me wonder if Batman got shot as he was throwing the cat out the window, and the policeman gets shot after he thrown it out the window, then it's a wonder the cat wasn't shot as it was flying out of the window. But the cat escapes just fine and runs on over to Selina Kyle. So now she has another Siamese cat, which I'm sure she'll be very happy to adopt. Unless it's the same one as earlier, but that wouldn't make much sense to me. Batman is cornered, tired, and losing blood. But he puts his tree-kicking practice to good use, and the beam gets snapped, and the ceiling falls down on everybody. And Batman is very grumpy with one of these guys, who apparently tried to kill the cat. So maybe that was why he jumped out of his hiding place earlier, but I'm not certain for you. He throws the dude through a wall, and as Gordon notices, to the cheers of the crowds. First of all, you don't think throwing someone through a wall might kill them? I suppose they'll have body armor on, but still, that is quite a risk. Secondly, how is he capable of doing this? You might argue the building was on very weak knees after being bombed, but still seems very unlikely for you. I wonder if Batman can punch through walls. We saw him karate chopping a brick in part 1. If so, why could he not have just karate chopped his way out of the building or something? Just break down the walls in his path since he's so superhumanly strong. So, the public either really love Batman or really hate the police, or maybe Brandon's squad specifically. It is not surprising really, since they did blow up the building with a few people still inside it. Very destructive of you. And who knows what trouble the squad has caused in the past. Very violent to me. And Batman, must really love his fans very much, because it is at this point his army of bats come onto the scene and attack everybody, friend and foe alike. And while this great panic and disarray is going on, Batman makes a dash for it. Doesn't he have any armor for his legs? Is it literally just tights he's wearing? Maybe he should invest in some shin guards at least. Commissioner Loeb notices his escape and tells them to give chase or he'll have them all shot. Wow, he is very ruthless for you. Anyway, what happened to his reputation? Isn't he meant to be under the radar at the moment? The next page is in this grey scale. The color sucked out. I'm not sure that it was necessary, to be honest, but it is Gordon speaking in past tense. What happened after? Loeb had chased the cloud of bats for a long time indeed, but found out that Batman was no longer with them. He must have separated from them at some point. I wonder how that worked. Is all he needed to do was turn the device off so they stop following, and then be on his merry way? Seems the most reasonable, I would say. What made the cloud of bats break up after 12 blocks of chasing? Why did they not break up earlier? Possibly it wasn't that much earlier when Batman broke his connection. I wonder to you. But someone called Detective Swanson pursued the bats over the end of this pier because he wanted to impress the commissioner, apparently. I would assume that he died because it says he pursued the bats to the bitter end. So, there is one death Batman is responsible for already. Although, can you really blame him when a policeman chooses to drive his car off the end of the pier? Stupidity to you, I must say. Not to mention they have a rather threatening commissioner. Everybody in the crowd and all a policeman was vaccinated for bat bites in the bottom. And the shop owner found a suit missing, but with payment for it left behind. I assume this implies that Batman was trying to evade capture by the police, potentially gets himself into more trouble by breaking into a suit shop so he has a normal looking clothes to wear and he doesn't get spotted. Very sneaky to me. I wonder how he got home. Surely he must have ditched the police motorbike along the way. How did he have the money to pay, I wonder? Surely Batman doesn't carry around whole wads of dollar bills in his costume. If he were to carry money anywhere, I would have thought it would be in his utility belt, but of course that was disabled, and I would think it's still laying there amongst the wreckage and the rubble this very moment. I wonder if the police found his belt, but they are rather useless, however. They never found his batarangs earlier, apparently. Some of Brandon's men were hospitalized. Broken bones to you. The one who tried to kill the cat. Pratt is his name. He is a Pratt to you. He had internal bleeding from being thrown through the wall. Is this not deadly to you? But they were trying to kill him after all. But he is not a killer, he says. Maybe Batman is very calculating. Maybe he is very accurate with the force of his punches, and he is good at mathematics and equations. He knows just how much force to use so that it does not kill you. Very reasonable explanations to you. The dead winos, which I believe means homeless drunkards or something like that. They had nobody to complain, apparently, about them being killed in the bombing. And anybody who could have pressed charges against Commissioner Loeb or Brandon could not be found. No trace by appointment or by phone. Very missing indeed. Maybe he should visit their houses. This seems like it needs investigating further. Very corrupted behavior to me. And very odd considering there were so many witnesses. A whole crowd gathered to watch this bombing, the results of this bombing and the explosions. Surely the press would have been all over this. Surely this would have been a big story, but I couldn't tell you. So we come to June the 9th, which is 2 days later, and Gordon's prime suspect is still Bruce Wayne, because he's the richest man in Gotham. And Sergeant Essen has told him that his parents were killed by a mugger when he was 6. By the way, this means that if he was 6 when this happened, and he's 25 now, and Bruce hadn't been in Gotham for 12 years, then he was 13 when he left Gotham. So only stayed for another 7 years before going on his permanent vacation. I must tell you, Alfred is a very irresponsible guardian indeed. So, Gordon figures this was a good motive for dressing like Dracula and fighting criminals and saving cats. Bruce's butler told Gordon that Bruce had been away skiing in Switzerland for 6 weeks. He made an international call and spoke to a man saying they were Bruce Wayne, who said they had broken both legs and an arm on the slopes. So, but wasn't Bruce Wayne walking around the city just after the incident? I mean, if he changed into a suit that he stole and then paid for, surely people would recognize him around the street, unless he was in disguise, of course. And of course, Mary Sue, genius Detective Essen, immediately realizes that Bruce would be able to afford an impersonator, and that casts on his limbs would be a good cover-up of his bullet wounds. So, she immediately thinks that the skiing was just a cover-up. Very clever of you. Bruce, meanwhile, actually has gone to Switzerland, even though it is, of course, was a lie about the broken limbs and that he'd been there for 6 weeks. And it actually wasn't Bruce on the phone. Someone at this lodge who was so eager to support him because he said it was about a woman. Very complicated to me. So now he is actually skiing on the slopes. Wouldn't it be ironic if he actually did break his legs right now? Very good story for you. By the way, this is only just over a week since the firebombing SWAT team incident where he was shot in the arm and the leg. How is he well enough for these activities? Look at him. Look at him go. Doing backflips like there's no care in the world. I suppose regeneration is another one of his supernatural powers. But while he's doing this, he's having a serious talk with himself. He doesn't deserve to be alive. This isn't a game. He has learning to overcome. But he by himself is not enough. He realizes he needs an ally. He needs Jim Gordon. So just as Gordon knows, Batman isn't really bad, just your average criminal. He is actually just trying to do the right thing. Bruce also recognizes that Gordon is a cop who is not like the others. He is not the average corrupt official. He also has good intents. So that is what draws them together. Now, June the 17th, Selina punched this pimpy man. His chin is hammered to the ground. She tells her frightened friend that they are changing their line of work. We're told Essen and Gordon have regular coffee at the local diner after their work shifts, and that's where they are now. Wait, he's only finding out her first name now. They have regular dates, and he's only now realized her first name was Sarah, and that her family was born from Germany. That is very odd to me. We first see Essen in May, but Gordon's been with since January. Surely she was around then also. And besides, he said it's becoming a habit for them to meet up. Isn't this the first thing you ask when you meet someone? Very extraordinary to you. And guess what? He only now discovered she's from Chicago too. The same place he was. I think it's implied that she is younger than him, as he says, surely he would have noticed her if they went to the same place for juicy ribs. But then he considers that she was probably in high school then, and I doubt she is the older one. But they eventually huddle into a doorway after the rain continues to lash down, and their proximity was just too much for them. This is called kissy time for you. Betrayal, adultery with a young mistress. How immoral of you! You have a mustache! Very awkward for you. She takes the cab and they don't say good night. I think the plan was for them to both get the cab together. How plans sour for you! August 7th. Selina spent all their money on this costume. Her Catwoman costume, of course. And then she appears to leap right out of the window. First of all, what shops sell costumes like that? I want to know the name of this store. For my own purposes. Secondly, surely it would be easy enough to identify her simply by tracing who that costume was sold to. Unless she just bought the different materials and stitched them together herself. Like in Batman Returns, I believe, is what happened. But thirdly, so does this mean Catwoman's origin is linked to Batman's origin? Surely no coincidence. She gets inspired to do this pretty soon after witnessing Batman's antics with the police. You might say that's quite poetic for this on and off couple. However, isn't it just a bit forced for you? Isn't it just unnecessary to the story? We're already being distracted enough as it is with Gordon's baby problems and his affair. And now we have Catwoman throwing things off track further. And finally, when Selina decided to leave that pimpy man and said she had an idea for a different line of work, that was June the 17th. Now we're on August the 7th. What took her so long? This is around 3 weeks later now. What have they been doing all this time? How have they survived? Where have they been living? How do they afford it? Meanwhile, Gordon is still depressed about his life. He still hates the city. He hates himself, and he hates the night, and he hates it when Barbara cries. Lots of arguments between them. And, as was hinted earlier, he is away too much from him. But Gordon gets very snappy to you. Barbara had called the office, but he wasn't there. He was with Detective Essen, of course, but she doesn't know that. He is feeling very guilty to you for calling her Sarah. How dare you! It is very unacceptable to call a woman who is not your wife by her first name. You are very disgusting to me. How despicable of you! Immorality! But he knows Barbara is right. He knows he is very foolish to you. He should be begging for his crimes. He should ask forgiveness. He should talk to her and not be thinking about Essen or Batman. He is a criminal and he is a cop. Is it that simple? But the cops in the city are dangerous. They are killers. Very corrupted indeed. Whereas Batman saved an old woman and saved a cat and paid for a suit. So, this is very hilarious for you. Gordon clearly holds Batman in much higher regard for saving that cat and for paying for a suit. I am not sure how he came so conclusively to the fact that it was Batman who took the suit. Why would it have even been brought to his attention? Seems like a petty crime to me in the grand schemes of Gotham. Maybe the commissioner has saved a cat or two in his life or so. Did you think about that, Gordon? Maybe he's even paid for his own suits before. Your sins are forgiven indeed. Gordon feels the weight of his gun in his hand, which he is holding for some reason, as he sits half naked on the edge of his bed with his half naked, pregnant wife sleeping behind him. Maybe he is suicidal. Otherwise, I have no explanation for you. That is a nice duvet, though. So that brings us to the end of Chapter 3. Just how we want our Batman comic to end, with a miserable, middle-aged man contemplating his sneaky affair and his doomed unborn baby, his argument with his wife, and the fact Batman saved a cat and paid for a suit. So, he can't be that bad, can he? So, this chapter had more Batman than previously. A lot of destruction for you. Except he didn't have his belt or most of his gadgets, which is one of the most iconic things about him. He was mostly just sneaking around, weary and injured, and when he's out in the open, it's a bit too unbelievable to take too seriously that he wasn't killed. We get a little more of Selina Kyle observing on the TV and observing in person, then at the end putting on her own costume. But really not central to the story as of yet. Gordon still hates life in general, hates the bloodthirsty police, and is conflicted about Batman, and his suspicion grows over Bruce Wayne, supported by Detective Genius Essen. Bruce recognizes he needs an ally with Jim Gordon, whereas this doesn't seem to have crossed his mind yet, Gordon's mind. On their paparazzi in Switzerland, seeing Bruce is still perfectly able to ski and clearly doesn't have any broken limbs, I wonder. They are not doing their job very good, I must tell you. The only significant development we have with Gordon is his affair with Detective Essen. Their kissy time! I'm not sure why this subplot is necessary to tell the story of Batman's origin either. Maybe they should have made a comic specifically for Jim Gordon's family disputes and affairs and leave that stuff out of Batman's story. The summoning of the bats was a very cool part of that whole SWAT team sequence, which clearly inspired the scene from Batman Begins, so it was interesting to see that. We see Batman can actually be very brutal, though he supposedly doesn't kill. So, the ending doesn't focus on Batman. In fact, he hasn't been seen for the last 6 pages, excluding Bruce. It's not so much a cliffhanger as the last chapter. This time more about Gordon's inner conflict and reflection, and perhaps the choices he will have to make going forward. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy this part 3 of Batman Year 1? Let me know in the comments below. Tell me your thoughts. Show me your crimes. And remember, jump on that subscribe button if you would like to eat the cheese. Farewell, my munchins. Take care, my munchins. Thank you.